Today we have an interesting and epic matchup as far as the L-mount lenses go. We all know that the 24-70 is one of the most versatile lenses that you can buy, and a lot of the times it's one of the first lenses that you invest in when you buy a camera. Now, I've already done a comparison video on the Panasonic 50mm 1.4 and the Sigma 50mm 1.4, but I didn't really have time to get in depth when it came to image quality, bokeh, distortion, ergonomics, all that type of stuff. So in this video, we're going to be doing just that. And let me tell you, it's very interesting when you compare it to my last video, especially in terms of autofocus, and I think it's going to clear up some confusion when it comes to autofocus on the S1H. Quick thing, big shout out to Pictureline. They're basically the ones that made this video possible. The Panasonic 24-70 is really hard to get a hold of, and they were super awesome, and they actually found this lens in one of their stores out of state and had them ship it over so I could make this video possible. So let's get started. My name's Dustin, your video tour guide, and please keep your arms and legs inside your chairs at all times. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. One thing quickly, you see this hat? I won it. Short story before we get started, I have a friend who's a DP who lives in my area, and I've known him for a while, but he has his own YouTube channel. He just started posting a few months ago. In his most recent video, he said he'd give away one of his company's hats if they could guess the mystery lens he was using, and yeah, I guessed it. So basically, I'm a freaking genius lens intellectual, so this review is gonna be over 9,000. Oh, and he says he's not trying to be a YouTuber, but I think he should be, so go find his channel. He owns an ARRI Alexa Mini, and comment on his most recent video. Make more videos about the ARRI Alexa Mini. Fury Motion Picture is his channel name. Just go do it. There's a link in the description. Go annoy him. Let's make him a YouTuber. Oh, and a future video, ARRI Alexa Mini versus Panasonic S1H? I think so. Anyways, sorry. Let's get into this review and start with the specs. Now, there's a lot of mumbo jumbo when it comes to specs on lenses, and so I'm going to save some of those details and just go over some of the stuff I think is most important. The Panasonic costs a whopping $2,200, at least at the time of releasing this video. It weighs 935 grams, which is about 2 pounds, and it has a maximum aperture of 2.8 and a minimum of 22. It has an 82mm thread on the front, but take note, it has no optical image stabilization. There's a few things to remember as well in terms of specs, and that is it is splash, dust, and freeze proof and rated for conditions down to -14 degrees Fahrenheit. Impressive. And it has a stepping and linear motor for fast and accurate autofocus. More on that later, and we will talk about image quality, flaring, you know, that stuff later. Now, the Sigma comes at a more manageable $1,100 and comes in a little less weight-wise at 835 grams, or a little less than 2 pounds. It also has a maximum aperture of 2.8 and a minimum of 22. It has an 82mm thread on the front and no optical image stabilization. It is dust and splash resistant, not freeze resistant, and it only has a stepping motor, no linear motor for autofocus. As far as ergonomics go for the Panasonic, it feels pretty hefty / bulky in the hand. It's a big boy lens, but to me, I wouldn't say it feels cheap, but it feels different as far as the construction. I know that's very vague, but I'll get into it when I get to the Sigma. The lens hood on the Panasonic is nothing special, it's just a lens hood, but I personally don't use these 90% of the time anyways, so that doesn't matter to me. It has a nice focus clutch to easily change from manual focus and autofocus, but one little nitpick is that when the lens reaches the end of its focus throw, it will still continually spin. But besides that, the focus feels smooth and I don't mind it. And other than that, there are no other buttons on the lens and overall feels like a well-constructed lens. The Sigma, in my opinion, feels really nice. I like the size, and funny thing, the Sigma weighs less, but it feels heavier in my hand. Weirdly, I really like this lens hood. It has this kind of tough rubberized feeling to part of it, which I think is cool, but again, most likely this will just sit in my closet and never to be used. The focus ring is only a fly-by-wire system, but it is very smooth and there isn't a huge difference in the feeling of the focus ring compared to the Panasonic, but I slightly prefer it as well. It has an AF and MF switch that clicks really nice, and it has an AFL button that can also be customized to what you like. It It also has a nice handy lens lock switch that will prevent the lens from drifting in your bag or when you're carrying it around. Keep in mind, it only locks at 24mm, but you can also force unlock it by turning the zoom. When you compare the two side by side in the hands, like I mentioned, I prefer the size and weight of the Sigma, and there is just something about the Sigma ergonomics wise that I like more, which is totally subjective and could be different for someone else holding the lenses. Like I mentioned too, the Sigma is smaller in comparison, and they both extend out when you zoom, but they both extend to the same length almost identically. One more thing to note is the zoom on the Panasonic rotates clockwise to zoom in, and the Sigma does the opposite by rotating counterclockwise to zoom in. Just keep that in mind. Let's move on to image quality. Now, I don't have access to charts and all that for this test, so this printer manual will just have to do for now. Maybe use my affiliate links and I can get charts in the future. That's a plug, if you were wondering. I shot all this at Cinema 4K at 422 10-bit, just so you're aware, and I'm only going to be testing it from a video standpoint, so sorry all my photographer friends. But all this should be very insightful information about the lenses, even if you are a still shooter solely. And yeah, honestly, even zoomed in at 500%, I really could not tell a difference between the two in terms of sharpness and saw virtually no signs of weird colors or chromatic aberration, even when shooting weirdly colored objects. I did notice a difference in the two when it comes to flaring though. The Panasonic seemed to be more resistant to any kind of flaring, but I kind of like the character that the Sigma gives in the flare, and this is also subjective because I actually like lenses that give a unique flare. I don't know if you noticed in that shot, but the Sigma does have some slight vignetting when at 24mm, and I did try turning on vignetting compensation in the camera and didn't seem to see a difference. But the interesting thing about the Sigma is that when it's at 24mm, it actually is just ever so slightly wider than the Panasonic at 24mm. So that might be a reason for the slight vignetting, and once you start zooming past 24mm, it goes away. When at 24mm too, there is some slight distortion on the edges and near the corners on both lenses, with the Panasonic probably being slightly less distorted. But again, this could be because the Sigma is very slightly wider focal length, and when you get to those wider focal lengths, it's hard to avoid distortion there anyways, and once you get out of 24mm, the distortion goes away. The focus pull on the Panasonic seems smooth and nice, as well as the Sigma, but this is where kind of my favorite feature about the Sigma comes into play. It has a really long focus throw and a super close focus distance when you're at 24mm. I could tell you the exact measurements, but just decided to show you because it's crazy. The Panasonic at 24mm, you can get about this close to the lens, where on the Sigma, I literally have to touch my head against the lens to show you. Like, you're basically at macro status right now, which I think is super cool. They're very comparable on the focus distance when zoomed out all the way though at 70mm. In the bokeh department, looks really nice on both lenses, but when you zoom in at 500%, you can see the Panasonic does have slightly more round, pleasing bokeh, but it is very close to the same when you're looking at it from a distance. I also did a quick balance test with both lenses on the Ronin S just to make sure you don't need to balance with any counterweights, and with both the focus motor attached and detached, they both passed with flying colors. And on these type of lenses, I typically like to put my focal length at about 50mm and balance from that point. All right, now, this is probably the moment you've all been waiting for. The autofocus. For the sake of this test, I decided to match the focus settings I did in my previous video, testing out the Panasonic 50mm 1.4 against the Sigma 50mm 1.4, which I had maxed out the speed and sensitivity. I do want to say I've done my own tests with these settings, trying to see if I see a difference, but honestly, there's only negligible differences in my opinion. I'm also going to be using continuous autofocus with human/face detect on. I have done tests doing the continuous tracking, and again, don't see a big enough difference to test more than that. I started off with normal lighting conditions and started far away from the lens and walked forward. Interestingly enough, the Panasonic, very surprisingly, does a decent job tracking me. It does have some weird focus shift when I walk out of the frame and come back into frame when it tries to find me, but it's not terrible. This is just super confusing to me because I did not get results like this in my previous video testing a Panasonic lens, and double checked too, and the 50mm 1.4 also has a stepping motor and linear motor for focus, so you would think I would get the same results. I don't know, man. Keep in mind, there is some slight focus breathing if you look here, but if you mess with your focus settings, this may go away. It's possible though the focus won't track as well or be as fast. I also tried moving super fast forward and backwards to see what it did, and I'm not crazy about it, but I'm still surprised that it is doing a decent job. It's not perfect, but somewhat acceptable until I started moving around in the frame while going forward. I wanted to see what would happen when I turned around, and it did stay locked on my head, even when I turned my face to the side. When you compare to the Sigma, I mean, it's not even a competition. And before you ask, I did check for a firmware update on the Sigma and couldn't find anything for L-mount, so I assume I have the latest firmware. But as you can see, the Panasonic outperforms in all departments. But the Sigma did stay locked on me when I turned around and turned my face to the side. Another thing, I know what you're thinking. This autofocus is very close to Sony's or Canon's. It's still not. And just for the sake of comparison, I shot the same tests on my A7 III, and it still dominates the Panasonic when it comes to tracking and has a really nice roll off when I walk out of frame and come into frame. I was so confident in the Sony, I wasn't even monitoring myself. I also did this same test in an extreme backlit scenario, and the Panasonic does still do a decent job, but notice the focus breathing. The Sigma, on the other hand, really struggled in this scenario. And the Sony absolutely destroyed. I was also curious how they would do in a low light situation. The Panasonic definitely struggled a lot more here, and it seemed to do fine at tracking me, but when I would leave and come back into frame, I sometimes had to wait a while for it to realize I was there. The Sigma struggled more than the Panasonic. And the Sony again dominated. If you're curious, I tried out the animal tracking and it seemed to do an all right job, much more acceptable than when I tried it with the 50mm in my previous video, and I didn't even try this with the Sigma. So what's the conclusion? In my opinion, like most things, it depends on your situation and what kind of shooter you are and what you're wanting. Keep in mind, I did shoot this at a 2.8, but I figured, you know, if you're like me, I shoot a lot at 2.8 because I just really like that blurry bokeh background. Bokeh? Bokeh. Should we call it bokeh? Probably not, that sounds weird. Anyways, if weight and size is your concern for you, the Sigma might be the way to go because the Panasonic is much more bulky and weighs slightly more. If you're a run and gun shooter though, maybe the Panasonic is better with the sacrifice of bulk and weight because from my tests, the autofocus does perform better than what I've run into in the past. But is it really worth it for you to spend that extra $1,100 to get that slightly better autofocus and for extreme cases a freeze-resistant lens, especially from an image quality standpoint, when the difference is basically identical, and even color-wise, which I forgot to talk about actually, but there was virtually no difference as you could see. So for a studio and talking head standpoint, I think the Sigma is a much better value, and when you get almost a wide-angle macro lens on top of that, or if autofocus isn't a concern, then 100% I think the Sigma is the way to go. Oh, and I'm currently filming this video in autofocus with the Sigma, so hopefully it does a decent job so you can see how it does with a talking head. You do get slightly better bokeh and less flaring with the Panasonic, but isn't that what all the rage is these days, especially among Panasonic and cinema shooters, is finding lenses with unique character to them. The Sigma is not an anamorphic or a Cook lens, but I personally don't mind the small imperfections that it gives, which is why for me, I'm gonna go with the Sigma. But again, this is just my opinion based on my shooting style and needs right now. Plus, I prefer to save the $1,100 for something else. That's all I've got for you guys. What are your guys' thoughts and opinions? I'd love to know what they are down in the comments. Hopefully you found this video helpful if you are on the edge on which of these lenses to buy. And if you are going to buy and want to support the channel, I've got affiliate links to them on Amazon in the description, and that'll help me create more videos like this in the future and possibly even invest in some charts so I have them in the future for comparisons. Be sure to give the video a double thumbs up if you enjoyed, and I have more videos in the works, so be sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell button if you want to be notified when they're uploaded. In the meantime though, happy filming.